Hello class, this is Dr. Hardin, and in this brief talk I want to discuss an approach that you can take to be more successful at writing academic papers. I've been a professor now for 4 or 5 years, and before that, of course, I'm still a pastor as well. And I've had a lot of experience in grading papers written by conservative evangelical students. And I think it's important that if you want to win the game of writing an academic paper, you need to be well schooled in knowing what game you're playing and what the rules of that game are. Unfortunately, sometimes your professors or teachers do not do an adequate job of explaining these things to you. So in this brief talk, I want to kind of give you 2 or 3 things to think about as you approach your academic paper writing. I think it's important to start with understanding what we're trying to do in an academic paper. If you go back to the ancient Greeks, their oratory, their rhetoric, the way they understood communication, they would break a message down into 3 distinct parts. The first part was called logos. That was the content that the speaker or writer was conveying or conveyed. There was pathos, which was the emotion or the affections that stirred within the reader or the listener as they received the message. And there was ethos, which was the way the person who's speaking or writing lived their life. It was the credibility that they brought, the authority as the messenger that they brought to the message. And so all 3 of those things are important, but in academic writing there is a certain emphasis which is not emphasized in other forms of communication within the church. So what we're trying to do in academic writing is we're trying to focus on the logos, or the content of what you as a writer are communicating. And what I mean by that is you need to come up with a solid argument. An argument is a proposition that can be disagreed with. And after you articulate this argument, you need to coherently and logically support and defend that argument by using reasons and evidence and logic. And then you tie it all together with a conclusion. What I see happening often in some of the academic writing that I'm reading from conservative evangelical students is that they're taking a mindset, they're taking a sermon from the pulpit and they're moving it into the classroom. Well, sermons are important, but they emphasize things a little bit differently than an academic paper does. For instance, a sermon will tend to elicit an emotional response or a call to action based on visceral emotion sometimes on the part of the speaker. So therefore, it's the idea is, well, if they're not getting it or you're not convincing them, just make a few more pleas, be a little more passionate, try to stir the emotions up instead of reinforcing your argument. The other thing that students will do, so some students then will focus too much. They sound preachy when they're writing their academic paper. And academic papers are not to be preachy. They're to be well-reasoned, objective treatises on a certain subject. Those that don't overemphasize pathos will tend to overemphasize ethos. And it starts something like this. In my personal experience, and then they'll give a personal experience or in some experience they've had or some sort of information they have based on who they are. Well, in an academic setting, that's not really relevant nor important most of the time. If I write an academic paper that's received by peer review, just because if I have PhD behind my name, that's all they need to know. They don't need to know anything else about me. In other words, there's not a lot of emphasis placed on street cred for those writing an academic paper. What they're wanting to do, they don't want it to be about you, the author, and your personal experiences. And by the way, your personal experiences may not be generalizable to the general public anyway, or to other people, or to society, or the church, or the world. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to put the focus back on your argument, making sure it's sound and reasonable and defendable and coherent, and holds water and it's airtight, and it adds to the conversation on the topic already being discussed. So keep that in mind whenever you're writing your academic papers. Focus on developing your argument in a calm, cool, rational manner. And then do not focus too much on the pathos. Do not focus too much on the ethos. Another thing you'll see, by the way, and this is why sometimes reading academic writing seems to be cumbersome and tedious. In an academic piece of text, the author is doing a couple things that can be very kind of boring, frankly, as that can feel. They're trying to show every view that's there, that's on a certain topic. Imagine people sitting around a table having a discussion about this topic, and there's person A, person B, and person C, and the writer's person D. Well, in an academic paper, they will typically tell you all about perspective A and B and C and D. They'll explain them, and then they'll say what's wrong with them, showing why theirs is better and how theirs contributes uniquely to the conversation around the table. But that takes up a lot of room. And this is why some of the academic works you read are like 400 pages instead of 150. That's part of it. The other part is, because their focus is on the content and not on the person making the argument, you'll see more than you would in other writing, passive sentences. Now, personally, I would prefer all of my students to write in declarative, simple declarative, straightforward sentences with subject, verb, object, because I just think it's clear and it helps you communicate better. But when you read some of these scholars, this is what you're running into and why it's kind of hard to understand. So let me reiterate. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to put forth an argument. And this argument then is well-reasoned. It's supported by evidence and facts. It's tied together with logic, and it adds to the conversation. If you do those things by focusing mostly on the logos, do not get over extended in pathos by trying to cause an emotional stir. This is not drawing in the net where you're trying to get people to come down front and join the church and get saved. And it's also not ethos. It's not look at me, how good and smart I am, or look at what I've been through, and therefore my personal testimony somehow lends credibility. No, use research, particularly peer-reviewed journals and textbooks or books, and use that in studies that have been done. Use that to support your argumentation. I hope that this talk has been helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. This is Dr. Hardin. God bless, and we'll talk again soon.